And I'm joined by Mr Troy Redfern. How you keeping, buddy?
Not so bad. How's it going, man?
Yeah, always good, mate. Yeah, always good to speak to you, mate. So thanks for coming back on, mate. Obviously, last year was a great year for you. You released Wings of Salvation album. That got great response for that. And you're not exactly resting on your laurels here, mate, because you already got brand new music out within the first few days of 2023.
Yeah. You got to sort of keep at it. It's it was like you said, it was a brilliant year because that you put an album out, you're never sure what's going to happen with it. Um, but it went down really well, and I got to thank you for making an album of the year, and you know uh, that was brilliant, and what you did with Beyond the Vibe as well. So but on a personal note, massive thanks for that.
No worries.
And then I thought because I knew the tour announcement was coming up. I just thought it'd be good to get to get something out at the same time as that, to sort of help promote that tour as well. So that was the sort of like the logic behind that. Get something out there, you know, just hit the ground running this year. You know what I mean? That was the sort of like plan, and just to sort of keep plowing on with it.
So was Fever written in the same sort of time frame as Wings of Salvation? Because obviously you're following straight off the bat, or was that?
No, that was done. That was recorded after Winter's End. Well, it was decided that I was going to do it after Winter's End. Sorry, not Winter's End, Rockstock,
Yeah.
Winter's End Syndrome. So we did that show, and it did well on merch. So I thought, right, okay, let's put that in, reinvest, and start the sort of process. And got in touch with Dave, and we got Paul in. So it was the same team that
I was
did
going to
Wings of
say the
Salvation.
same team that did Wings of Salvation, isn't it?
Yeah. But I've got an amazing relationship with Dave. He gets it. He gets what I'm trying to do, and I think working on Wings of Salvation is really kind of like locked in with him. What the vibe is.
Yeah.
So it's not as much explaining, because he kind of knows what we're doing, and is trying to sort of push that up a gear. I think everyone says it. It's like a super cliche, but I reckon that they've done with the mix on the new track, to me, is better than Wings of Salvation. I think maybe it's the track because it's a different type of song, so maybe it's that.
Yeah.
Because it's punchier, a bit more ballsy, maybe.
Yeah, it does seem like a bit more, like you say, a bit of a more bigger sound, more of a kick in the gut with this one than some of the other songs on Wings of Salvation.
Yeah. So maybe it was just the track itself, sort of like required that, so it ended up being sort of a bigger. But no, what's it's really sort of like fired me up for is for writing the rest of the album. We're writing at the minute, and and it's given that song has sort of given a template, I think, a vibe of what I want us to do with that. So no, it's good that we got it out. We did it in this sort of time scale, and those guys turned it around quick. Because it's like people to organise. You know what I mean? You sort of like suddenly decide you want to do a track, and just making sure everyone's sort of available, because they're all busy guys.
Yeah, of course.
Just trying to make sure Paul's available to do the drums, and sort of and Joe can mix it and that. But no, they pulled it off. Well, we all pulled it. It was a sort of like a good like team effort, and I think I've got with those guys. I've got a nice team, and for the next one, I definitely want to work with those guys again.
I was going to say, is that the plan to work with Dave and Paul again for the next record?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because like I said, because it's when you start working with someone, it's the same way when you're in a band with someone. People get to know the vibe.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right. I wouldn't necessarily want to get a different drummer in, because I think Paul is like is like a perfect balance, really. He's ballsy, but he's just got like a good. He's not sort of like particularly chop heavy. He's not sort of like doing crazy parts. There's some great fills in the stuff he does. You know what I mean? But
solid drummer though, isn't he?
Oh yeah. He's like, the guy's a monster. And I've sort of been in the room. Obviously tracking him. And he's sort of he really does kick ass. And then obviously Dave's great. And like I said, we've got a great relationship where we're working through stuff and working through ideas and production ideas and stuff. And so no, really looking forward to cracking on with it.
That's great, man. So I'm intrigued. Obviously, the Wings of Salvation album was when we last spoke. The album was done. in 5 weeks. I think I'm right in saying, between creating it, mixing it, getting it ready to roll. How long did it take you to do one song?
Well, we had a month to get it. It needed to be done by the 31st December. So we had, I think Rockstock was about the 5th of December, I think. So it's probably about the sort of 10th I decided to do it. So, we had a few more days, and but I think because we knew it wasn't the same time window. It went, it was a bit, but it was cool because we had more time on that one to like work on the solo, and which we might not have had time in the Wings of Salvation. That was a different sort of process where a lot of the solos of the Wings of Salvation were kind of like one take sort of thing. We do multiple takes, but it would be the one take. Where this one is more of like an arranged solo, where it's a melody solo, where it's almost part of the song. So it's one of those solos that if it wasn't played, you'd notice it. Were some of the solos in the Wings of Salvation, you could probably do other stuff, and it kind of wouldn't matter. But this one, it's almost like when I go out and play that, that's kind of the solo. It's a part. Exactly. That's exactly it. It's not. Yeah, it's a different. It's a melodic sort of solo, but that was really cool because it really it made me sort of lock down some bits, and just having a different approach and think a bit more. So like we were very sort of like specific how we wanted certain things to sound. With like there's an Octavia in one part, and there's a whammy pedal in another part. There's different sort of like, so you've got different segments which keep it kind of interesting, and it's got like a contour to it, so it's got like a start, like an arc to the solo. But no, it's just really cool, and I'm just chuffed that that it's out, and it's a different thing. It doesn't sound like anything off the Wings of Salvation musically, I don't think. But like I said, I'm super chuffed to be working with those guys, and have sort of really creative people who are up for trying to push it.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I was speaking to you earlier just on a social level because I was sat at work with my headphones in, listening to your Island album.
Yeah.
And it just sort of occurred to me, like, obviously, like your previous records, I would say up until maybe Fire Cosmic, have been quite sporadic in their tone as such, because you've done acoustic stuff, you've done more bluesgrassy stuff, you've done now rock out, and then listen to that space rock where you pushed me right back, which was a whole completely different flavour from what do you feel like in the last couple of records that you've sort of really sort of defined who you feel you are now? Obviously, as a musician, you're always constantly evolving and taking on things.
Yeah, well, I was talking to Dave about this because we were sort of talking about my back catalogue stuff, because he went back and listened to some of my stuff only a couple of days ago,
All right.
which he hadn't heard. So that, and he was saying it was hearing rockabilly influences which aren't as apparent now, but I was saying to him, there's like an album on Bandcamp called The Black Flames, which the production's pretty shocking, you know what I mean? But the ideas are there, and it's in a similar sort of vein to what I'm doing now, in the way that it's tuned down to C. I was using tunings like in C back in, I can't remember when The Black Flames was. That been 2004, 2000? It was a long time ago, it was like a long time ago. So I've always had that sort of compartment of liking that heavy detuned stuff.
Yeah.
And so in fact, one of those, there's a track on The Black Flames which I was looking at today, and a lot of that stuff on Bandcamp didn't get proper releases. It was when I was kind of starting off, and I was almost just like, I was recording stuff at home, so I wasn't even releasing it really. I was just putting it up, you know, and it was just going up on sort of like a platform and just existing there. And some people found it, some people heard it, but there were some cracking ideas, probably underdeveloped ideas that could be sort of there's one in particular I was just actually gonna sort of demo it this evening, into the project for Dave to hear. So we might rework one of those tunes. That it's someone that's been on my mind for ages. Some of those, like just going back through and seeing if there's any sort of sections that or choruses that I like in that stuff. Again, because it's been like no one's really heard it, and I feel like that stuff on Bandcamp is kind of demo level stuff, But I think this next album is going to be more rock orientated, in the way that, when I say rock, no more rock than the Fever.
Yeah.
But that kind of vibe. So there's still sort of obviously the slide playing, which all that kind of stuff. And there's blues elements in it, like the intro lick on the Fever is kind of like a blues thing, sort of, but it's probably in production going to lean that way a bit. Not sort of like super heavy, overproduced rock, it's not going to be it's that sort of stuff, but it's going to be ballsier and probably not going to the Americana thing as much,
No, that's fair play. I mean, you say you're going to know which way you want to go take it, and I don't see you ever doing anything that's too overproduced, to be fair, mate.
Well, it's a fine line because you don't want it to sound because it can smooth it out too much. It's a fine line between
it's a fine line, and it's not always easy to get that balance. And there's been artists that I've loved who haven't always got it right. But like you say, it's not an easy balance to strike when you're trying to get that big sound. But like you say, not wanting to take the raw edge of it too much to the point where you don't really get that grit, which is neat.
No, because a lot of stuff, as you would know, modern rock stuff generally people use drum samples. Yeah. Pretty much everyone does, because you want that really sort of like consistent rock sound. You'll use samples. The drummer might play it, but with a program you can just get the snare to be overlaid with a sample or the kick drum. And I think keeping a real drummer in there, and getting like Paul in there, at least that kind of gives you that kind of foundation of like it's a real kit. Even if it's
Oh, I've lost your sound, mate. And I've lost you, Troy. Think you're back.
Oh, did I go off?
Yeah, your mic just went off just for a second, mate. That was all.
All right. What was I saying?
We got to it's taking the royalty out of the music, I said.
Yeah. I think that like I was saying, most modern albums, rock albums that you hear are sort of like they're overlaying samples on the drums to make them sound really consistent and powerful. And I think the most important thing I can do really is to keep that foundation drum tone, so that it's real, and like I said, Joe's absolutely amazing at getting a good mix. Like the kick drum on the Fever, I think is huge. It's a powerful sort of sound. He's brilliant at mixing. So like I said, it's a fine line. I still want to sort of like edge in it. That's really important to me. Is something that sounds edgy and powerful, and not too sort of like smooth and contrived. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what you want, buddy. Obviously, you were saying that you've begun for this single in promotion for the tour that's just been announced with the Commoners.
Yeah.
I've got to say, like I love the album that they released earlier this year. I got to speak to Adam, the drummer of the Commoners, for their album "Find a Better Way" earlier this year. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the guys live. But how did the tour come together between yourselves? I'm guessing Mr Noble was involved somewhere along the line.
He sort of like obviously works with those guys, and then put me in touch with their manager, and their manager was up for doing it. So I've been in sort of touch with Brennan. Nice. And between ourselves, we kind of sort of like worked it out. Sort of got different people involved. And DHP are sort of like, were involved with promoting some of it, and it's just I think it's going to be a good mix, of bands really, because we're very different. What we do is it's the same ballpark, but it's like them, like they got that rock and rolly Black Crowsy vibe, which will appeal to sort of different people to maybe what I do, but hopefully people will like both of it. If because if people are coming to see the Commoners, hopefully like my set and vice versa.
I think so, man.
There might be an overlap.
I mean, I was trying to this. Obviously, Ryan of Beyond the Vibe that we were speaking about earlier. And me and Ryan were talking about it. I think it was last night when Wednesday you announced the tour, didn't you? Sorry. Was it Sunday? I can't remember. I've had such a busy day of week, mate. I've lost the days of the week. No, it was on Planet Rock when you did my Planet Rock stock had gone and spoke about then, didn't it? Sorry. So, we were speaking about it then, and both of us, because I'd heard the Commoners, and I know Ryan's a big fan of the Black Crows. So once I got the single sent through the radio show, I fired across to Ryan and said, "Look, you check these guys out." And we both agreed. It's a collaboration that where, like you just said, you're in the same ballpark, but you're not going to be getting two sets of exactly the same thing. That could be slightly mundane, but there's enough
Yeah,
of a
yeah,
crossover there where people should just have a really good time.
yeah. They're they do sort of slidey stuff, sort of like but like I said, it's more that kind of like major kind of like tuning stuff, where it's we're sort of pretty upbeat. No, I think it's a really good pairing. I know I don't think it could have been any better. And it's their first sort of like tour over here. People have heard about so for that you want to see people on their first run as well, so it's like when Robert John the Wreck first came over. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's good to be on the first, to see the first tour when someone comes over, I think.
Oh, definitely. Like you say, there's something I think personally just exciting when a band comes over here for the first time. There's that
Yeah,
sort of bit of magic to it.
yeah,
When you see them on that first run, as well. When I saw the Damn Truth earlier this year on their first sort of run of UK
yeah,
shows, like you say, there's the bit of magic there somewhere.
yeah. No, they're another great band. Those guys are brilliant all rounders. You know what I mean? Brilliant performers, great songwriters. No, they're brilliant. They're great. And I think they're coming back, aren't they? They got another
Yeah,
run.
yeah. I know they're back at I know they're coming back for Stillhouse next. It nearly said next year is this year now, obviously, but
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah. Now they come back for Stillhouse. I'm sure they'll do some more dates around that.
yeah.
Otherwise, it's a hell of a long trip to come over from Canada just
For a
for a
day,
show.
yeah. Yeah, I wish it was easy to get over there as it is for them to get over here.
Definitely, definitely, mate. I was just looking at the dates here. It's quite an extensive tour you're doing the Commoners, mate. You're all over the shop. You're in London, Singbourne, Southampton, Brighton, Sheffield, Oxford, down to Bristol, Birmingham, Newcastle, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester, York, Chester, and then finishing off in Nottingham, mate. You're doing a hell of a run there.
It's a good run. It's a good run. It's some good venues in there. It's yeah, it's not, and it's nice to finally go out and do a sort of like I know it's a co-headline, but it's nice to go out and do a full set because like I've been doing a lot of support tours and to get out and stretch it out, so, to whatever it's an hour and something long set instead of just doing those half-hour short ones. It just means you get more material, you get to have more of a dynamic in the set instead of it being sort of like flat out the whole way. You get nice to have a sort of like a dip in the set. We'll take it down a bit.
Well, last year, mate, I
Um,
wondered when you actually went home because you were off for the Choir Boys, then you were off for the Suite, and then you were off with Robert John and the Wreck, and then you were all over the shop last year, buddy.
it was crazy since lockdown, and that first Robert John tour. Yeah, it did seem like they just kept flying in, and it's one of those things. There was such different audiences. Like the Sweet audience was obviously different to Robert John, and then the Choir Boys again. And I was out with Dare and When Rivers Meet, and a lot of those were separate audiences. I don't know if the Sweet would know the Dare crowd. So it was great playing in front of lots of different types of audiences,
Definitely.
and trying to win them over. I mean, so it's like like I said, the hardest one I think we spoke about it before was the psychologically for me was a Sweet tour. Because I was solo, never done a solo run before. Oh, well, I did Robert John on the Wreck with a kick drum and the guitars, and that was such a pain in the ass going out and keeping that kick going. And I was like, right, I'm going to do this just with guitar. So I remember walking out into Birmingham Town Hall, and it's such a huge stage. That's probably one of the biggest stages. All those Sweet stages were pretty big. And walking out on the Todd, thinking, and that was the first gig. It was a weird story with that because I was meant to be doing it as a duo. I'd rehearsed the setup. I think I've told you this before. Rehearsed the setup with Ben 2 days before. Get the call. Sorry, you're going to do it solo or not at all because the Omicron had just kicked off and they were paranoid about getting COVID because that would have killed the tour, obviously. So so I had a couple of days to kind of like get my head into gear that I'm just going to be doing this by myself. So like I said, the first gig, Birmingham Town Hall, it was a bit of an out of body experience walking out and they going, oh Jesus, because I didn't know you're playing to a large amount of people and you're trying something out and for the first time in front of that sort of audience instead of like normally you would sort of like maybe do some little gigs or some warm-ups or whatever just to try and get to make sure this is going to work. And that was just kind of like, right, it's got to work because you just can't fall on your ass on that. You've got to so did you come to were you at the Bury on the Sweet tour?
I was at Berry on the Sweet tour. Yeah, I was. Yeah,
It was that one. Okay, yeah, I remember that. Yeah, it was the last tour. It was the last night,
yeah.
wasn't
It
it,
was
of
the
the
last
tour?
night of the tour. That one, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So by the end of it, I loved it. The first 3 or 4 gigs were pretty sort of hairy, and then I got into the swing of it, and obviously I'm playing the same set, so I kind of you start getting into a rhythm of the set. and then by the end of it, I was kind of having fun with it and kind of like enjoying being solo, because you could just you had complete freedom. You know, it takes a while for that to sort of like for that to register at a gut level that that you can stop. You can do anything. You can stop. You can change parts because it's just you. You know, you're so I think you're so I'm so programmed to in band mode where you kind of like that's the song, that's the arrangement. Yeah, you got a solo, but you got to stick to it. And it was cool, sort of like being with just on your by yourself, and I wouldn't be phased by doing it now. You know what I mean? It was good for me to do that, just to get out there and kind of know that I could do it and do it the way I did it, because I was advised by a couple of people to sort of like, oh, you got to take it down. If you're doing a solo thing, you've got to bring everyone in, all that kind of stuff. And I did exactly the opposite of that.
You did.
And I just went out there and played like I was playing, like, because I want to play like what I want to see, if you know what I mean. I'm not like a introverted singer songwriter who's going to sit there with an acoustic guitar and sort of like give you a half-hour story about sort of like whatever it is, and then sort of play. So that's not what I do. It's not my vibe. It's not what I do. I think if you try doing that and it's not your thing, that's when you fall in your ass, because you're just like,
not being
it's not real. It's not real, is it? It's like someone else's thing, And I thought, right, just do it the way your gut tells you, and then then if it doesn't work, it's kind of it's on me, not someone else.
So obviously you're saying there, obviously on the Sweet tour you were solo. Then when I saw you again with Dare, you were duo, because you had Jen and Ben on drums with you. And so with the tour with the Commoners, is it yourself? Is it duo? Is it full band?
It's me, Finn, and Kira. It's a 3-piece on that one.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so it'd be like more like a proper set. Or ideally at some point I'd like to take it, maybe a rhythm guitar player out, and have a 4-piece all keys. It's maybe at some point. But yeah, at least having the sort of like the 3-piece, that's kind of like at least the songs can be like they're supposed to be. Because whenever we did when we did Wings of Salvation and this track, we're kind of aware that it is going to be played as a 3-piece, so we're not sort of like overly layering stuff up, and putting too much stuff in there. It's just like we're keeping it fairly stripped down. There might be like a double track guitar on a chorus, maybe to lift it a little bit or something, but we're trying to sort of keep it pared down.
Oh, it's going to be nice to see Finn again, mate. So I must admit, when I saw him when you were playing Dare, that was the first time I'd seen Finn play, and he is a hell of a drummer. I really just enjoyed watching him play.
Finn's he's a really interesting sort of guy, because he's a real character drummer. He's back in the day when you'd have bands like, I suppose, in the 60s and 70s, where you would know the drummer. They would be an identity in themselves, like like the Who, and I know obviously that's a big identity. But most bands, Queen, everyone knew who Roger Taylor was. Back in the day, you'd always know the full band. You'd know them as separate. Yeah. Whereas these days, a lot of the rock bands, especially, they're just some dude in the background. You don't really know who it is. You can pretty much focus on the guitar player, the front guy. And what I like about Finn is, especially if you're doing it as a duo, he is someone you want to watch.
He's a showman as well, isn't he?
Yeah, and he's a natural showman. So it's not like put on, but he's there at the side, and he's whooping it up, literally whooping it up. And loving it, and everyone's he's a lovely guy. I think with Finn, what happens, his personality comes across when he's playing. So when people meet him after, like, he comes down the merch stand and people sort of come and say hi. Yeah. He is a really, really nice guy, and got great energy. So that is kind of like exactly what he is. So I think people see that he is real, and again, it's not a show. He's not like doing like some stick 12 kind of sort of like showmanship, the big up. But no, I think the world of Finn. He's a lovely sort of guy, great to play with, great to travel with. He's a good laugh, you know what I mean? And that's a lot of it, because, well, yeah, with the Dare run, like you were saying, we're doing half-hour shows, so the rest of the time we're together in the car, in the hotel, all of that stuff, we're spending together. So I think that's as important as anything, is that the person is cool and good laugh and fun. And because he's quite young, he's got sort of that young sort of like energy and stupidity that I love. You know what I mean? Just like arsing around all the time, and it's great. You can't ask for more than that. I love it.
That's fine. Obviously, as well, later on the summer, so on a personal note, thank you again. You'll be back at the Apex for Just Push Play, so thank you again for playing, buddy.
Can't wait.
No, I really can't wait. I mean, the tickets are already going really quickly from compared to what we've been in some previous years. So we're already on. I think don't want to jinx anything, but I think we're on target for another sellout. To be honest,
Super.
which is amazing. We had the seated tickets because they always sell the first balcony at the Apex first, and we had the lower balcony up December 23rd, and by New Year's Eve they'd gone.
Yeah.
And they already opened up the top balcony up at the Apex as well now, so which hasn't in previous years actually been opened up to about March time. So
Right.
I'm taking that as good stand. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I don't want to take anything for granted, but it's looking like it's going to be good figures there again this year, which is great. But
Right.
other than obviously you got Winter's End as well, but are you planning on any touring in the second half of the year, or are you planning on concentrating on recording after you've got this tour done with the Commoners? Or
There's about 8 or 9 festivals I got
nice.
throughout the summer. One of them's just come in, which I can't announce yet, which I'm really chuffed to be a part of. I don't know whether they're announcing that. That's kind of end of the month, I think, or maybe the first week of February they're doing an announcement. But that one was unexpected, and it was one I wanted to get on, but I thought it was already tied up.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, so I'm chuffed to be on that one.
Oh, well done.
Yeah, there's Alpha New Day Festival. There's a sort of like a few good ones. So yeah, well, it's just at the minute all focus is pretty much on this this first sort of UK tour, and then we'll see what happens at the back end of the year. But it'd be nice to get the next album out. Plans are to get it sort of like done by end of February, maybe not mixed, but recorded up to that point, so it's all like in the bag.
Yeah.
And then we'll see when that comes out. I'll see for that sort of like in a couple of months after. But once it's there and it's done, like the mix process is pretty sort of like straightforward. You just need to get up to that point where it's kind of like it's all in place, it's all edited, and all that kind of stuff. So it can just be handed over for a mix, which probably take a week, and then but then it's the sort of like it's the just all the other stuff, getting vinyl printed. So there's a lot to it. Last year, it's a lot. Putting an album out, I think, is pretty full on. I don't think people realize the components that you have to have in place, and that like the cogs that have to be sort of like this. It's not just it's not just the recording of it. It's the sort of like the promoting of it. Getting the physical product made. Doing the Kickstarter. All those things are pretty full on and stressful. You know what I mean? Like, because you want it to sort of move along, get it done right, and all that stuff. So yeah, so it'd be put myself through another year of that. But it's going well. The backing of sort of like Planet Rock recently and the last few months has been amazing. That's been like,
it's been solid there back in May in the last sort of 3.
Yeah, after sort of like well, yeah, through sort of last few months of like last year and sort of like this year with helping with the tour and stuff. So it feels like now would be the wrong time to take your eyes off the ball. Do you know what I mean? Because like I think things get forgotten about really quickly and stuff, and you want to keep things rolling. You know what I mean? And the way to keep things rolling is music. You know what I mean? That's the thing that makes it, that drives it really. And I like, I love writing stuff. It's not like that part of it is a difficult or a pain. That's the sort of like the creative bit. But it's once you have that in the bag, then it's getting everything else kind of like physically made, artwork, all that kind of stuff, or getting the package made, and getting that on time. I was lucky. The vinyl got quoted. Was it April? I got quoted originally to get so I wouldn't have had the vinyl yet, and luckily they got brought forward to November.
Wow.
But that that was stressful. So it's sort of, because people have already sort of done their Kickstarters or pre-ordered, and you're thinking, geez, that's a long time to wait. But like I said, I was lucky in the way that Cyclone, who I use, who are brilliant, brought it forward, or there was a gap in their schedule or something, and they could get it to me quicker.
Oh, that's good.
and that's it, and that's a weight off your mind. Then when you sent it out, that's kind of like it's done. You know what I mean? You've fulfilled the orders, you know, and people have, you know, have got what they pledged, and I feel like, you know, that's like a weight off your mind, you know.
Defo, buddy. One thing I did want to ask you, given the news yesterday, and I don't know how much of an influence the guy was on you, but obviously yesterday, Jeff Beck sadly passed away.
Oh yes, unbelievable. You know, I'm a huge Jeff Beck fan. You know, blow by blow. My daughter Violet was born to that sort of album. That album was on when
Wow.
she was, yeah. So, and a bit, you know, as far as I'm concerned, you know, Jeff Beck is the, like everyone's been saying on, you know, on social, is the sort of, is the man. You know, his like finest instrumental album, you know, Blow by Blow, Wired, even, you know, his latest stuff. But what's interesting about him to me is that were other people or peers of him from back in the day did their thing early on the 60s, you know, late 60s, early 70s, and kind of stopped really. You know, they're kind of known for what they did then.
Yeah.
Where Jeff Beck constantly sort of pushed it. You know, the albums he did. I was talking to Peter actually today about his favorite, which is from Jeff Beck albums, and he's like the, you know, the album Jeff. And I think it was David Torn, who's one of Bowie's guitar players. I don't know if you've heard of David Torn.
Yeah, I've got the name.
White,
Yeah.
mad white hair, sort of like does a lot of experimental solo guitar stuff with computers and pedals and stuff. But he's amazing doing soundscape stuff. So David Torn produced. I think it was the one just called Jeff. I think it's the one with the little the diddly bow guitar. Or was it the one with the oil on his hands? I can't remember which one it is. But it was like really futuristic, sort of chopped up, sort of like almost like dance music mixed with guitar and stuff. And, you know, it's just really super interesting. You know, someone who just kept on pushing, you know, pushing,
Yeah,
it's
he
playing.
did constantly trying to push those boundaries, didn't he? Always.
Yeah, and with a unique voice on the instrument, you know, like, and that's all anyone's after is trying to have, you know, to have an identifiable sound. You know, it's like Brian May, you know, and Jeff Beck, and all those. There's a handful of guitar players who, when you hear them play, you know it's them. 100%, you know it's them. You know, for their sound, their phrasing, they kind of like, you know. And I think Jeff Beck's musical voice was super strong, where you just know, you know, and that's mixed with the creativity and having that musical voice. I think is the ultimate, and doing it so early and being like a, you know, forerunner of sort of like so many different things, the stuff he did with the Yardbirds and, you know, and the fusion stuff in the 70s, which is my sort of favorite era. Yeah, there's not many people, you know, it's, you know, we're getting to that sort of like time where so many people of that era are dying because they're all getting to their,
Of course.
you know, their 80s or whatever, you know. And I'm always sad, you're always sad, you know, but I'm not one for sort of like doing posts and stuff, you know, that kind of thing, really, you know. But Jeff Beck, I think, was the one in recent times who sort of like, it's like, geez, a bit like Prince, I suppose, that kind of thing, or David Bowie. You know, there's a handful of people who are just like, the world will be an emptier place because of those people sort of going, you know, on the larger music sort of scene, because they were such towering sort of like figures.
But like those people you've just mentioned, alongside like David Bowie and Prince, he was someone who constantly reinvented himself, constantly pushed the boundaries of what he was doing.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying, you know, there was some great guitarists that set off around the same time that everyone else would also say was an icon. But like you say, they almost stopped pushing themselves and relied on what they had done previously. That was like some people I think have a short period of time where they really are at their peak and they really are at their pinnacle, and that sort of creative juices are flowing. And Jeff Beck and people like him, like David Bowie and Prince and all these kind of artists, they just seem to be constantly like they you know, their creative juices just never seem to diminish, and their hunger for wanting to try new things never seem to diminish either.
Yeah, 100%. It's like sort of Clapton, you know. I love Clapton's sort of early stuff he was doing with Cream and, you know, and the you know, 70s, but it just kind of flattened out, if you know what I mean. It didn't sort of like, you know, obviously did great shows and stuff like that, but album wise, it didn't really do much for me. So within, you know, in the 90s, it didn't sort of progress in the 2000s to me, you know. And we get a Jeff Beck album, you'd be like, geez, that's something new. I've not heard, you know, I've really not heard that. Same with David Bowie albums and Prince, you know.
I was having a conversation about Bowie albums actually, because obviously it was the anniversary of Bowie passing away, and with a mate of mine, and they were like, he's like, oh well, after the Ziggy period, Bowie didn't really do much, and I'm like, mate, you are missing out so much Bowie from him if you think
Yeah.
the sort of Ziggy period. I mean, I really like Outside and Earthling. I'm just looking at things over there, and Heathen I was rediscovering this week because I've not listened to that for a long time. But like you say, these artists just
Heroes and and Diamond Dogs and well, pretty much all of them. They're all in their own little worlds. Each of those albums are just little masterpieces. I'm personally not a fan of the Let's Dance kind of like mid-80s, early 80s thing. That's the only time that I'm. But I don't think many bands sounded good in that period. I think because of the way everyone was using the sort of like those sort of like sample drums and stuff.
Yeah.
I think Bowie sort of like. Didn't he have Steve Ray Vaughan on one track? I can't remember which solos Steve Ray Vaughan played on, but he was always, his radar was super on for all the cutting edge guitar players at the time. He's always had a nose for that. And I love the story about when he went to he was in Germany and went to a Zappa gig, and he sort of like saw Adrian Belew play.
Oh, yeah.
And they said he wanted to sort of chat to him, and they decided to pick a restaurant somewhere at the other end of sort of like the city. I can't remember whether they were in Berlin or I don't know whether but so they drove back to this restaurant, and it happened to be where Zappa and the rest of the band were already at. So they'd chosen the exact same restaurant. Anyhow, they walked in, and Bowie said to Zappa, he said, "Oh, great guitar player you got here, Frank." and Frank Zappa said, he said, "Fuck you, Captain Tom." So he demoted him from major to captain. And he said, "Oh, we're not going to be like that, are we, Frank?" And then he just said the same words again because he knew what he was doing. He knew he was poaching his guitar player, and he did. Adrian Belew went with David Bowie and started, did a few albums with him, which is what are you going to do? It's like having a pedigree, like playing with Zappa, then playing with Bowie, and then Talking Heads, and Pink
Creek. Hell of a CV, isn't it?
Yeah. But like I said, he's always looked for. Is it Reeves Gabrels on Earthling?
Yeah.
He's another sort of like an amazing guitar player with a really odd kind of angular vibe going on, and like so with about David Torn. And he on the last album he had Mark Giuliano, didn't he, on drums, who's just like again another cutting edge player. He's like a jazz sort of like dude. I don't know whether you call him jazz, but sort of like experimental jazz maybe. But he always seemed to know these underground or the players to get. You know what I mean? He always must have been sort of super aware of the scene and what was going on, and getting Steve Ray Vaughan in when he did. And
just seemed to be always on that cusp of it, didn't he?
Yeah, and he was lucky. I suppose he had such a loyal fan base. He could take these turns creatively and have people follow. Do you know what I mean? Because it's it's not it'd be very easy to lose a fan base, wouldn't it, if you did that?
Oh God, yeah, the man with twists and turns that man did in his career. Say with Jeff Beck, I mean, like you say, putting guitar lines along with like more sort of synth loops and electro bits that he did as well. That would be very easy for. And I'm sure not everyone who liked him from the Yardbird days also like that, but equally he was respected enough to carry, either carry a lot of people forward or certainly bring new people to the party with each sort of twist and turn that he did.
Yeah.
It's like even on the last Ozzy album that Ozzy did, Patient Number 9, like Jeff Beck poems up and that and does a solo, and the song got released, and like you say, it's that thing. I was like, right, this doesn't sound like Jeff Beck. And I didn't realize Jeff Beck had only done the solo. I don't think he did the rest of the sort of the rhythm tracks.
Right.
And I was listening to it and waiting for that Jeff Beck sort of sound to hit me. And then the solo came in and I'm like, there it is. It's just like, there it is.
Yeah. No, it's super, super sad. It's and it's going to be, there's going to be more of it. You know what I mean? It's like we're in that era now where there's a lot of people you could think of.
Oh yeah.
At that same sort of age, I think we're going to be in the next 10 years, well, the next 5-10 years, we're going to lose pretty much all the icons, the remaining icons, because they're all, no one's going to live to sort of, 100 probably, it's a shame because it's not the same, obviously, because of the way the music industry was started, was happening then, in the 60s. it's not the same, is it? You haven't got those characters coming up, and and you got, with social media, with sort of people sort of like famous on Instagram or something like that.
Yeah,
Um,
sadly.
it's a different thing, and it's not the same, and you got more of it, so you got tons of sort of guitar players, and yes, no, it's a real shame,
Cheers, buddy.
but but he's had a great life.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, he was touring up until
Given
what,
so much,
last year? In tail end of last year, he was still out there touring. So,
yeah.
all right, buddy. Well, thanks for your time as always, Troy, buddy. Great to chat to you. At the
Oh,
beginning,
you too, man.
I know, always a pleasure to have you on, man. You know that. At the beginning of the interview, naturally, we're going to play the Fever, with it being a brand new single. But as you know what's coming. What song of yours do you want to play at the end?
Say Gasoline.
Yeah, cool. I'm up for that. All right, buddy. Well, I'll see you soon, and take care of yourself, Troy, man.
Nice one, man. Speak to you soon, Lee.
Take care, buddy.